Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now today we're on location in the county of Monmouthshire in South Wales, land of my fathers. We're here at Grosmont Castle. It's incredible actually when you think where we are. We're in a tiny little village high up on a hill in South Wales, but this is part of what's called the Three Castles. You see, under King Stephen, 1135, he brought in a lordship that had three castles: White Castle, Skenfrith and Grosmont. And these were here to keep this road from Wales through to Hereford safe. There's only 5 miles in between each of the castles. They form a bit of a triangle, and people love to do the three castle walks. But it's Hubert de Burgh, 1219. He'd already had the castle once, lost it. He'd exchanged ownerships between the king and him and other people, but eventually 1219 he manages to complete a stone great hall, stone curtain walls, and these absolute incredible flanking towers. Now, I'll have a closer look at these mural towers, they're called. They jut out, and they are there literally, if you can see just in the join of the wall, you can see an arrow slit. And that's the idea. Anybody who managed to get down the ditch, you are covered from so many different portals, so many different arrow slits. One thing I love about this place, when I used to bring the kids here, was to show them how the drawbridge works. And it's a bit of a challenge for me because I haven't been here for years, so we're going to go across the wooden bridge and see if I can find the evidence of the drawbridge. So we're standing at the entrance to what would have been a 2-storey magnificent gatehouse. It's all gone. The stone's been quarried, this has been a ruin for years. But you imagine the great big winding and weights that make this actually rise up, and then there's a stop, bang, about here. And if you look down, you can see where the counterweights for this mighty drawbridge would have swung down as it slammed shut against the enemy. You can see the space there. So when one of the enormous drawbridges opened up, that's where it literally folded down into the gatehouse. Now, right at the bottom was often where they put their prisoners to rot. But there's an extra thing with this gatehouse. As you approach, so that's the first drawbridge, but you're still not in. There's a second drawbridge here for the inner gatehouse. It's only a small one, so you've got the giant one at the front, then you've got a smaller one here, and you can see it has its own drawbridge pit, a lot smaller than that great drawbridge there. So it means you've got to get across the great big drawbridge, smash it down, bring it down, then charge forward. But hang on, there's another gap with the drawbridge shut. And don't forget, they had big doors behind them. So this is a series of drawbridges. And that's kind of a reflection, because if I remember correctly, I don't think this place was ever captured. I know there was a king's army outside, and I know that there was an attack during the revolt of Owain Glyndŵr, but apparently it failed. But this was not a great castle. This was a luxurious place to live. Very small, very compact. And what we're going to do, we're going to go in and have a look around. So it's an interesting thing. As these castles declined, the owners who owned the ruins, they would put it up for quarry. So you could say, well, I fancy building a house in Grosmont village. Can I have X amount of stone? Yeah, you pay, you come up with your barrows and your wagons, and you take the facing stone. But if you then come across a nice window or a doorway, the edges are always a contrasting stone, a different kind of stone, and they're often carved. So you'll notice one of the first things to go in any castle ruin are the doorways and the windows, because people have paid their money and they've quarried the doors and windows, as well as, of course, the facing stone. In Grosmont, there's another interesting little thing. There's loads of them. But this one is, we're in the gatehouse, right? The gatehouse complex. Really important. You've seen where the drawbridges were. But as you come here, there's a doorway that goes onto the top of the ditch, a sally port. Now, you imagine the enemy is trying to get up the top there, so you could have soldiers could come out and they could engage them. They could fight them. This would have been, for sure, a fortified doorway. The film Lord of the Rings, when you see a certain Aragorn and a certain dwarf, they come out of a side gate, Helm's Deep is it, and then they swing around and fight the enemy. It's a sally port. Has to be done. But I don't think there'd have been an Aragon here. Probably a Jim Smith or something. I forgot all about this. Look at this. This is the original cobbled pathway to the courtyard, hammered in stone and then covered in with all different kinds of grit and mortar. And it's still here. It's amazing. So we're going to go and take a look where the Great Hall used to be. It was this side of the castle was this beautiful stone-built Great Hall. But as we go in, you don't end up in the Great Hall. These are storerooms. We're downstairs. The Lord of the Manor had his Great Hall above us. In fact, over there is a fireplace at ground level. That must have been a kitchen. Then above this must have been the Great Hall, because if you look over yonder, that enormous gouge out of there, then you can see what's left of the chimney. That was the Great Hall fireplace. And there would have been another fireplace at this end. You can just about see where the chimney went, but the whole fireplace has been taken out. What you had above here was living accommodation. So there's the Great Hall. This is the living accommodation. If you look at the illustration here, you can see that there's an external staircase that goes up from the courtyard into the Great Hall on the first level. If you go diagonal across to the right-hand corner, it's believed there was a spiral staircase in the corner tower just to the right of the main fireplace in the hall. This will give you access to the upper floor as well as the battlements. And then across the Great Hall, you can see there's an enormous wooden screen. And this gives access to the private chambers where the noble lord would have slept. Only his servants and he and his family would have access to that. So this puts flesh on the bones. Unfortunately now, though, it's just a shell and the tower has completely disappeared. So this is one of those castles where, okay, we've got the stores, we've got the kitchens, the great halls, a beautiful fireplace that would have been there, the accommodation here, and then it changed. They built more luxurious accommodation, and the way you can tell it was luxurious is something that is quite rare. I'll show it to you. So next we're going to go through that doorway there over yonder. That's going to take us out of the courtyard of the castle into an accommodation building that was built on the back of the castle, but it includes a mural tower, one of those flanking towers. So you now have improvements to the castle. The man in charge, the earl or whoever it is, wants to have his privacy, and his privacy is behind those walls. Let's have a look. So we're entering a small room here, but it must have been a lovely room because it has a window and a window seat that looks into the courtyard of the castle. But if you look up at yonder there, you can see the underneath of the stairs that used to be on that side of the hall. So here you have a thick wall, defensive. I presume there would have been arrow slits. But it's that beautiful chimney up there. I'm going to have to climb the wall, so I've got to be very careful because I don't want to fall to me death. So watch this. So here we are, we're on the back of the castle. We're in this accommodation range, this block. This circular piece here used to be part of a mural tower, a fighting tower on the back of the castle. But as the castle developed and they built the accommodation block, right from over there, the castle accommodation block incorporates this, continues past, and this becomes defunct as a tower. However, I've noticed at the bottom there is a drain. So although there are no signs to tell me, I reckon this, the cellar part of the tower, became a cesspit. And that will make sense when you look at some of the other evidence around here. This accommodation block is dominated by this fabulous 14th century octagonal chimney. It's a bit wow. And here is the fireplace that's underneath that chimney. And it's virtually, well, the chimney is complete. The fireplace has gone. And there's a reason behind the fireplace has gone. We're missing an enormous part of this building. So there's a fireplace at the bottom here where you have that enormous bird's nest. But if you look up above, there was another fireplace in the room above. You know, when you come to these places, you've got to regard them as a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. Put the pieces back together. When I came this side to look at these fireplaces, I didn't know there were two. And then I realised, well, how do you get into the rooms? But of course, there's a doorway from the accommodation at the Great Hall. So there would have been wooden flooring in here. That's something I often miss in these places. You can see where the stonework went. But of course, you can't see where the floors used to be, especially when there's so much of the castle missing. And this being the outside wall of the castle, this is where your latrines, your garderobes, are likely to have been located, just above the cesspit, into which they would empty and then drain into the ditch, ready for collection by the gong farmer. Right, we're going to leave the accommodation now and we're going to go into the courtyard and explore some more of the castle. So, I'm coming up from the gatehouse, out of the courtyard here, into what looks at first time just as a defensive tower. However, the archway that used to be here. Why on earth would you have such a grand archway in a defensive tower? You don't realise it until you get in and you start to put this castle back together. So, yes, of course you have your arrow slits. On this floor there are 1, 2, 3. This is that flanking tower, so you've got them tight up against the wall. But look at the putlugs, the holes for the joists, they go across there. This is a heavy floor here, so it can take a lot of weight. Then if you come up just above the arrow slit, you can just about see the remains of where the other floor joists used to be. And then you go further up, the tower changes shape inside. So above us, you have a fireplace. Then even higher, you have a vaulted ceiling that used to be there. You can just about see where the joists used to sit. So this isn't just a fighting tower. Above the army bit is accommodation. Those are proper windows, they're not arrow slits. So my question was, all right then, you've got those lovely windows, that lovely archway, you've got the entrance, it's accommodation. How'd you get up there? You know, I looked at these stairways here, then I realised they've been cut through. This is to let the tourists up onto the battlements. We'll have a look at those in a wee while. When you turn and look at this isn't just an empty space. This is a spiral staircase. And I'll show you how it works. You come in, your stairs are actually here. And you can just about retrace them all the way round until you have the spiral above me head. That's just brilliant. And you wouldn't realise it, would you, until you turn around and had a look. So the way the battlements worked is quite ingenious. They were all interconnected. They gave you 360-degree access to the top of the castle. The way you got to the battlements was up through one of the towers using the spiral staircase or through the gatehouse. If one of the battlements was breached and the enemy were there, you could simply close off that section by shutting the doors in the towers. Then because all of these towers were actually higher than the battlements, your crossbowmen or longbowmen could shoot down onto the enemy who'd breached that section. So what we have here is one of the mural towers. Looks like there was some kind of an arrow slit or window pointing in that direction. And when you look back, just how high that accommodation tower really was. And then, of course, when you look out from the battlements, well, as a longbowman, I can tell you, I'd create havoc from here. Just try to imagine as we follow these walls around. rebuild the battlements and follow them as they go around the new accommodation block, around the outside of the Great Hall, across the fortified gatehouse, through the other mural towers, and back to this one. It shows just how fast the garrison could respond to an attack on any approach to the castle. But before the enemy could get to this castle, of course, they had to navigate that ditch. So there you have Grosmont Castle. Once a luxurious home and fortress, now an absolute stunning ruin. But it still holds echoes of its medieval past. The border wars between England and Wales, its connection with Owain Glyndŵr. Grosmont Castle, for sure, has seen centuries of history unfold.